No country without debt. The United States of America, which today has the highest amount of debt in its history, owes more than $38 trillion. The European Union has roughly $14 trillion, Japan nearly $9 trillion of debt. Even Saudi Arabia, the oil king, Germany, the export giant, and China, the father of mass production, all carry incredible debts on their shoulders. But here lies an interesting situation. If everyone is in debt, then who is the creditor? Welcome, this is money's destiny. Here is the place where economy, history, and power unite. Welcome, beautiful human, to the place where all confusions are simplified in a fluent language. First, I must point out, in this world, no event is as transparent as it seems. Debt is in reality more than just a burden. It is the very skeleton of the world. This invisible debt network is built upon crises, wars, rises, and collapses. And when we examine this network more closely, a very disturbing truth emerges. The world does not actually owe money to a specific person or institution. What we call debt is an obligation circulating within the system itself. In other words, the world owes money not to an external creditor, but to the structure it created itself. However, this does not mean that the system treats everyone equally. Debt and the profits arising from debt are not distributed evenly across society. Some constantly profit from this cycle, while others remain only on the paying side. Today, the total debt in the world has exceeded $315 trillion. This figure is almost 3 times the total value produced by the global economy. The world carries much more debt than it earns. So let's think, how did we get here? This picture is not a modern story that began with credit cards or digital banking. On the contrary, its roots go much deeper. The foundations of this debt system were not laid in times of peace, but in times of war. Humanity turned debt into a tool to finance the costs of great conflicts, and the ironic part is that we are still living inside that system today. Let's go deeper. The year is 1694. England, in the middle of its war with France, had almost no gold left in the state treasury. In this deadlock, the king turned to merchants. He knocked on their doors and made them an open offer. You give me money today, I will make regular interest payments to you with the taxes collected. To regulate and sustain this new and unprecedented agreement, the Bank of England was established. For that time, this was truly revolutionary, because for the first time, the state gained the power to spend money it did not yet have. The merchants in return obtained something extremely valuable, the official word of the state, a word assumed to be reliable, tradable, and transferable. Thus, government bonds, today the backbone of the modern financial system, were born exactly from this need and agreement. France adopted this model. The Netherlands carried the system further. The newly established United States of America used this debt system both to finance the War of Independence and to expand westward. Over time, national debt ceased to be a sign of weakness or failure. On the contrary, it became a measure of the state's credibility. A state that could borrow was seen as strong and capable of survival. In the past, empires conquered land to obtain gold. Now, instead of land, bonds are issued to earn interest. Thus, war moved from swords to balance sheets. Today, debt has practically become the world's largest product. The United States carries about $38 trillion, Japan $9 trillion of debt. Global debt increases by about $1 trillion every 100 days. Today, there's almost no country without debt. Banks lend, states borrow. Citizens, through taxes, savings, and pension funds, are simultaneously both debtors and creditors. So, in this picture, who really owes whom? Starting with America makes a lot of sense, because U.S. debt is not limited to its own borders. It is a global issue. About half of the $38 trillion of debt consists not of obligations to state institutions, but to investors in the market. About 2/3 of these investors are Americans: banks, pension funds, investment funds, insurance companies, and even the Federal Reserve itself. The remaining 1/3, about $9 trillion, is in foreign hands. The largest share among foreign creditors belongs to Japan, followed by China, then the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. Therefore, the statement, "the US owes China," is not entirely wrong, but it tells only a very small part of the truth. The American debt held by China is only about 2% of the total. In fact, America's biggest creditor is itself. The Treasury issues bonds, banks, and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve repurchases them while creating new money. Americans pay taxes. These taxes return as interest payments into Americans' pension and savings accounts. In other words, there is a closed cycle. Debt is real, but the creditor is largely within the system itself. This system is not unique to America. It is a cycle operating on a global scale. Japan lends to the US. The US provides resources to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to developing countries through the World Bank. Developing countries hold their foreign reserves in Western bonds, channeling money back into developed economies. This resembles a global, hot potato game. The only difference is that what passes from hand to hand is not a tangible object, but promises. Everyone holds someone else's note. Each promise stands by another promise. As long as no one leaves the game, the system continues to work. But real power lies more in the markets than in states. Behind the bonds are giant investment funds, central banks, and pension systems. These structures, managing trillions of dollars, determine which country can borrow cheaply and which must pay dearly to survive. When they lose confidence, currencies collapse, governments fall. Democracy decides who governs. Markets decide who survives. Central banks lie at the heart of the system. They not only manage debt, they also create it. When they buy government bonds, they inject new money into the market. What is debt for one side is wealth for the other. Every currency in circulation is the counterpart of a debt recorded somewhere. That is why there's no such thing as debt-free money. Behind every banknote and every digital currency lies an invisible IOU, a debt note. This system has stood for many years thanks to trust. As long as investors believe that states will at least pay the interest, there is no problem. But when trust is shaken, we have seen what happens. In Greece, Argentina, Sri Lanka, when debts became unpayable, creditors suddenly became visible. IMF, rating agencies, big funds, and the cost of this process is most often paid by the people. Interestingly, the system starts working again after every crisis. Old debts are covered with new debts. Because in the modern world, debt does not exist to be repaid but to be constantly rolled over. Governments do not plan to completely pay off their debts. This is not a secret, but an open policy. Interest is the fuel of the system, and the global economy runs on this fuel. The US will never reduce its debt to zero. Japan has been rolling its debt for decades, and no one panics. Because government bonds are still considered the safest assets in the world. If these debts were ever truly paid off completely, the existing financial order would collapse. That is why debt constantly grows, not randomly, but in a controlled and rhythmic way. Therefore, statements like "we will end the debt" are largely an illusion. The goal is not to eliminate debt, but to keep it portable and sustainable, because the system stands on belief. Once belief disappears, the numbers lose all meaning. And finally, we must see this truth. We owe ourselves is only half true. Interest payments are not distributed equally in society. They usually flow from the bottom up. Debt changes hands not only between countries, but also between classes. Therefore, as debt increases, inequality also increases. In this story, there is no single culprit. Neither China, nor Wall Street, nor the IMF is solely responsible. All of them, and we, are part of this system. Debt has now become money itself. And if this balance ever breaks, we will remember what debt really is, a promise that cannot be held forever. If this narrative opened a different window for you, subscribe. History carries the answers within. I will show you where to find them.